South Africa joined the rest of the world yesterday in observing International Workers' Day, also known as May Day. Now, every year on the 1st of May, the world celebrates this day to honour the labour force's contributions globally and serves as a reminder of ongoing workers' struggles. However, the world of work is undergoing a period of transformation in the 21st century. There's been slower growth in industries with traditionally strong unions, such as manufacturing. Remote work is becoming the norm, and labour is increasingly casualised, unpredictable, and dispersed as artificial intelligence, automation, and digitisation reshapes the global economy. To reflect on the role of trade unions in the 21st century, we're now joined by labour analyst Terry Bell. Always a pleasure, Terry. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning to you.
So, I mean, this is such an important conversation because we look at May Day or, Workers' Day, and the celebrations in South Africa are hard to celebrate when we have a look at such a high unemployment rate. I mean, standing at about 32% approximately in South Africa. What role do unions play in this 21st century economy?
Well, 32% is, let's face it, an underestimate. If you've got to take the expanded definition, which is over 40%, and even that, because of the definition of what work is, we probably have a realistic unemployment rate in terms of people who are only partially employed for a day or whatever, a month or whatever, of more than 50%. In some areas, youth unemployment is up to 80%. We know that. Yes, in a time like this, and it's not just South Africa, this is a global problem. The unions have more need to be relevant today, but they're not. They have declined in terms of membership, in terms of relevance, in terms of political clout that they may have had before, and they have generally fragmented as part of this thing. And one of the reasons, I think, is the very things that you actually raised, the so-called fourth industrial revolution, the automation, the move with AI, particularly artificial intelligence. This is a new world. It's a changing world, and it's a changing scene of work. And the unions, unfortunately, by and large, have not adapted to this. What we have seen, however, the beginnings, the small shoots, once again, because this is like a repeat of how the unions first began, with gross unemployment, with austerity measures, etc., and they resisted, and they set up a new democratic. The idea was unity of all workers on a democratic basis. We're seeing that happening again. Unfortunately, the majority of the larger unions have become largely absorbed or incorporated into a bureaucratic system, which is a mirror image in some ways of a corporate boardrooms. And unless they change, they're in trouble. And they better adapt, because for the sake, I think, of humanity as a whole and the planet as a whole, we actually do need the force, democratic force, of the majority of people in this world who happen to sell their labor in order to survive.
So let's reimagine unions. What should they be doing? What do they look like? Because, I mean, when we look at a union, we traditionally look at unions fighting for wages of their members, perhaps maybe healthcare, housing, education. I'm not sure, but things are changing. They are changing, and let's reimagine them. What should they be doing in this day and age?
They should still be doing that, but they should be organized totally democratically. It should not be a top-down situation where you have usually the general secretary or the president it moves seamlessly from union office into, South Africa is the classic example, into parliament and then into a ministerial post, the whole of them, then from there into business and becomes a multi-millionaire, billionaire. That's the situation that the system that the unions were resisting, and that's what they have to do. But in order to do that, they should use the very modern technology that is beginning to undermine the traditional role of workers. Use, for example, cell phone technology. We have fantastic communication, which can be used for the workers as well as being used against them. They should start to organize, rather than from the top down with a posh office and a chauffeur for the general secretary, etc. No, organize in groups using cell phone technology, use modern communications technology, but keep everything on the basis of democracy. I think we started going wrong back in 1993 when COSATU had a Congress, and it was moved by actually the National Union of Metal Workers, that they said, look, the ANC is about to become the government. We better get out of the close alliance with them because the government will be the largest employer in the country, and we shouldn't be in bed with the bosses. Well, they lost that. The next step was 1996. The three then existing federations, and that was COSATU, NACTU, and FEDUSA, came together and produced a very reasonable, hardly revolutionary, but macroeconomic policy called social equity and job creation, which placed redistribution at the center, leading to growth. This was in response to the business community that had put forward growth for all, which was one of those classic examples of let's have growth and we'll have trickle down. You know, the rich get richer and therefore their wealth trickles down. It doesn't work. It works the other way around. That was based entirely on the ANC's own macroeconomic research group's work, which had worked for years to produce. And it was dumped by the leadership of the ANC. And instead they brought in growth, employment, and redistribution gear, which turned everything on its head. What did the unions do? The unions complained, but COSATU, the major union, stayed within the alliance, within government, and we saw what happened there. I think that was, again, a watershed moment, which showed that the unions were failing to adapt, were failing to put forward a real alternative. They can do so, and we're now beginning to see, not only here, but in other countries as well, the beginnings, usually among the more disorganized or unorganized workers, the casual workers, those people who may even work on 0 hours, not even know if they have a job today or tomorrow for an hour or 2 hours. These are people now who are starting to organize as well. And, perhaps interestingly, people like architects who now suddenly discover that because of modern technology, they no longer have their great skills to use. They're simply used to manage the building sites. So they've now formed in New York, for example, the first of the architects' unions. So hopefully they won't go off the rails. Hopefully unions will adapt. I hope they do. They should do. If they don't, I think we've a problem for all of humanity.
You know, the biggest problem is, and I mean, you've raised so many different issues there, but I mean, I'd like to just to talk to the whole political stance and, you know, the alignment with the ANC and major unions. One of the biggest things is that keeps on coming up as an example of where, you know, it is a problem was the Marikana tragedy, and where you saw unions just far too close to governments. The credibility of these unions, where are they right now? I mean, do they still have credibility?
I think there's some credibility. I think a lot of credibility has been lost. And you mentioning Marikana is really accurate. Because here we had a situation where the president of the union at the time was being paid a very hefty salary by one of the mining companies. And the shop stewards effectively had become the line managers for the mining companies. They kept the workers in line. And that's what had happened. What happened there was workers rebelled democratically against their own shop stewards. And they reacted in a very harsh manner by firing a gun. And then there was the usual scuttlebutt. Someone's been killed. No one had been killed. But nonetheless, that started the whole thing. And I think as a result, you've had a load of workers deserting, unions themselves, not being able to analyze. We need now also, in fact I haven't mentioned, is a lot more education, which is also lacking now, whereas 10, 20, 30 years ago, when the new union movement began here, education was one of the strongest elements within the emerging unions.
Yeah. You know, we talk about a fight for relevance as well, because the world is changing and it's changing very, very fast. And many also voicing opinions that perhaps unions are completely out of touch with the workforce and what is actually needed. I'm reading a wonderful, it's a front page article in the Mail and Guardian, and they're just highlighting a lot of companies that are completely changing the way things are done. A Mediclinic, for instance, this is me reading from the Mail and Guardian, recently announcing plans to automate a lot of their functions, the administrative functions, that can eliminate 1,000 jobs. That's what they're saying. Another company, Remgro, for instance, put a freeze on non-essential hires, saying that AI is now going to take over this. So as technology companies, they're there, it's happening. This is what we're doing. Where does this leave unions, and how do they adjust to this new workforce we have?
What they need to do is to say, this technology is wonderful. Let it liberate humanity. Let it liberate people from having to do the drudgery, the awful work. Let us use the technology to benefit humanity as a whole. You know, not just the few, but the many, in other words. And this can be done. I mean, I'm worried. I mean, I hear Elon Musk, we all hear about him, but he says that by 2040, there will be more than 40 million droids, robots doing work. Now, what does that mean? It means they've succeeded in making, if they do that, making most of humanity redundant. So you have some of the wealthier people, such as the chap from Microsoft, I forget his name offhand, who said, yes, Bill Gates, yes, who said what we need is a massive income grant. In other words, let's give a few crumbs off the table to keep them quiet. That's not going to happen. We're going to end up with islands of extreme affluence, if this is the case. It's a dystopian view. Islands of extreme affluence supported by AI and even perhaps robot soldiers, and a massive mass of humanity, savagery, barbarous, etc. It's a terrible thing to look forward to, and that is what the unions are needed for right now, is to try to fight for and resist and try to use this technology, brilliant technology, use it to the benefit of humanity rather than the profit of the few.
And that's the reality. And Terry, as we wrap this up, I can't but focus on the youth. 60% of young people unemployed. And this is where we're at right now in South Africa. It's a technological world. I mean, are there any innovative, you're talking about these innovative solutions, are there things that the unions here in South Africa are actually adapting to, app-driven, technological advancements? Are these things happening within our unions to adapt to the new world?
Very, very rarely and in very few instances. That's one of my greatest worries, that it is happening. That's the hope. I just build on that hope because, for example, the government keeps saying we're doing the education, we're going to put a new grade R, it's compulsory, but they don't train the teachers. So it's a complete fop. It's another sop that's just thrown to us. The unions should be there saying, enough of this nonsense. This is what we want. Here are the alternative policies. Which of you are going to support these policies, and the unions will support you, but not become part of you, because we are unite workers as workers, irrespective of race, creed, whatever. We are merely have a basic thing, and the basic rule that the unions stand for is encapsulated in the Bill of Rights. It's as simple as that.
All right, we leave it there. Terry Bell, so much to talk about. We didn't even talk about strikes, taking to the streets. Is protest action still the relevant thing? That's a big question I'd love to have squeezed in, but I can't. Terry, thank you. We'll have you back to talk to us about a lot more. Labour analyst speaking about the role of unions in the 21st century.